Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We are a spiritually alive, radically inclusive, and justice-centered community. And we are so glad you're here in person and online. My name is Lori Cross, and I'm your Sunday associate this morning. I'll be sharing a couple of announcements. First, today is the next Odyssey presentation at 1 p.m. with our own Barbara Nadolny, who is in the house. There she is, and has been a member of our fellowship since 1961. I don't know how she did that because she's only 24, but we're not gonna, okay. Join us and her in the sanctuary or on Zoom at 1 p.m. and I'm gonna say the magic word, food, before, stay. All right, second, next week on Saturday, we're hosting Getting to Know You from 10 to 2. Lunch, of course, included. We're all about the food. All right. Newcomers, new members, and anyone who wants to brush up are welcome. We'll be learning about UU history, and Reverend Alison's going to be talking, we're making history. She's talking about that later, coming. Our fellowship's history and structure, and ways to become involved. Please RSVP by emailing welcome@muuf.org. That's welcome@muuf.org if you'd like to come. Third, our collection today will be split between the ministries of our fellowship and NORWESCAP. NORWESCAP's comprehensive array of services help people address immediate needs as well as build resiliency for long-term success. So please give. You can give via text, www.muuf.org, via cash or check in a basket, which will come around later, or checks can be mailed actually directly here, 21 Normandy Heights Road, that's Morristown. In the area of stewardship, we're in the middle of our annual resource drive. I'd like to invite Paul Snellgrove to come down and share his story with us.
Hello, everybody. Oh, I should leave now with that accolade. When Candace Donaldson, who's the director of the resource budget drive for this year, asked me just a couple days ago to talk about, give a testimonial in terms of our annual fundraising for our budget. I said, oh no, oh me, it's that old fear of speaking before crowds kind of kicked in. But given a second or two to think about it, say, why not? Because Muff has given me so much. I've been here almost as long as Alison, but certainly not as long as Barbara. I'd be 3 years old or something like that. But Muff has given me such incredible sustenance, I would say. I was looking for a spiritual home, and one that also had a social justice component to it, and I found that in Muff. And I found through, obviously things cost money, things to keep it running there, and we are so lucky to have such persons as our minister, Alison, as our music director, Stearns, Nick, who directs our educational program. Can think of Katie, who runs the administrative part of the things. You never see Katie, but she is doing a dozen things. We witnessed Alex in action earlier today when the microphone wasn't working. But again, a lot of people are giving, and we don't see them, and it's really meant a lot to me. I also have a small little role on the facilities thing, and I got to know that there's a lot of things that have to be fixed in this place to make it look as good as it does. So for all of these reasons, for people that are paid or unpaid, for having this beautiful building, for having just services and all sorts of social justice programs like NORWESCAP that we contribute to, Wind of the Spirit, Family Promise. These are all worthwhile things that I feel that my pledge is so worth giving to. So I hope that everybody has been enriched as I have over these many years, or just even as you start now, because Muff has certainly been worth it. So thank you. Oh, one last thing. If you get your pledging today, you're in the lottery for an Apple iWatch. So, I mean, that's a big thing.
And I'll just say, if you are thinking, oh, I don't want an Apple Watch, or I already have one, if you don't want it, it could be a great gift, right? It would be maybe a very... First turns. I'm not... First turns. Oh, Alex is telling me, oh, I'm not on. Am I on now? No, it says mute now. I'm on. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. So the quick thing was, if you don't want that Apple Watch, you could give a great gift this year. So to Stearns. To Stearns, that's right. There we go. There was the joke. Let us open our hearts for worship. And let us begin by lighting the symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. And I invite you to join with me in reciting James Villa Blake's words in unison, a shorter version of one of the covenants that unite us. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And then I invite you to join with the responsive reading. The words are on the screen. If you can't see up to the screen, it's number 594 in our hymnal, and it is based on the principles and purposes. Lori will begin, and I invite this side of the room to join Lori with the first part, and then we will echo with the italicized words on this side of the room.
We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
We believe that each and every person is important.
We affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
We believe that all people should be treated fairly.
We affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth.
We believe that our churches are places where all people are accepted and where we keep on learning together.
We affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
We believe that each person must be free to search for what is true and right in life.
We affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process.
We believe that all people should have a voice and a vote about the things which concern them.
We affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
We believe that we should work for a peaceful, fair, and free world.
We affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
We believe that we should care for our planet Earth. And now will you rise in body and or in spirit? And what is the number of 1014, answering the call of love. The words are behind me on the screen and in your teal hymnal.
So every soul is blessed and made whole.
in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are standing beside our love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, and broken by faith, we dare to proclaim with our hands around this cross.
So for our time for all ages now, I know there are not many little children in this service, but we like to bring this because we are a fellowship that believes in reaching out to all ages, to our older members and hearing their stories in our Odyssey, and also talking to our little children. And so I like to remind you folks who can see all of the little kids up here that we are still doing that. But if you want, check them out online. They're very cute and very silly. And it's a lot of fun. When we read our responsive reading, what was that based on? Did anyone see the subtitle up there? The responsive reading. I'm sorry. The principles and purposes, right? We, as Unitarian Universalists, have how many principles? 8. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the fourth principle. So this is what the example I had for the little kids and for us. Our principles and purposes tell us what to believe. Many religions have different things they believe in, right? Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's books, sometimes it's other practices, right? Buddhists have the Four Noble Truths. Jews have the Torah. Christians have Jesus. There's all these things that kind of guide what they believe. For us, it's our principles. And we hold them differently than some. So, some folks in different religions, different religious folks, like to hold their principles like this and ruin the microphone noise. Right? Nice and tight to their heart, like we sung about. Sometimes they're closed-minded. Things can't get out, in or out. And then there's other people who have beliefs, maybe, but they're real sloppy about it. They just kind of like hold them around, and things can fall out. Come on, there we go. Or you can throw things in there without really thinking about them very much, right? Maybe we saw it on the internet or watched it on cable news, and now we have a belief that just showed up out of nowhere. Or there's some people, let me pick up some of these. This is why it's fun to have the kids. They pick them up for me. And they use their beliefs to beat people over the head with. They may be full of good things, right, like the golden rule, but when we use them to make other people believe what we believe, that's also not a great way to hold beliefs. Because as Unitarian Universalists, how do you think we hold our beliefs? We hold them very nicely. Open, but in front of us. We're paying attention to them, so things can go in and come out, but we know what's going in and going out. It's very deliberate. We hold our beliefs very deliberately. So we're going to talk about those beliefs, the 7 or 8 principles later on, and we'll hear all about it. So I hope that made sense for you all. I think we're going to do our offering now. So yeah, where's that being split to? NORWESCAP. That's right. Now I remember it. All right, there we go.
Thank you, Stearns. The free mind. I call that mind free, which masters the senses and which recognizes its own reality and greatness, which passes life not in asking what it shall eat or drink, but in hungering, thirsting, and seeking after righteousness. I call that mind free, which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith, which opens itself to light whencesoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven. I call that mind free, which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse, which discovers everywhere the radiant signatures of the infinite Spirit and in them finds help to its own spiritual enlargement. I call that mind free, which protects itself against the usurpations of society and which does not cower to human opinion, which refuses to be the slave or tool of the many or of the few, and guards its empire over itself as nobler than the empire of the world. I call that mind free, which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past, nor live on its old virtues, but which listens for new and higher monitions of conscience and rejoices to pour itself forth in fresh and higher exertions. I call that mind free, which sets no bounds to its love, which, wherever they're seen, delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering, which recognizes in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children, and offers itself up a willing sacrifice to the cause of humankind. I call that mind free, which has cast off all fear but that of wrongdoing, and which no menace or peril can enthrall, which is calm in the midst of tumults and possesses itself, though all else be lost. William Ellery Channing.
I'll mention that William Ellery Channing wrote those words in May of 1830, and many of us look to Ralph Waldo Emerson for inspiration. He looked to William Ellery Channing for inspiration. It is the time in our service where we honor the milestones, the transitions, the joys and sorrows that have happened in the lives of our fellow congregants since we last met. And I have a few to share today. One is a joy from Shari Lowe. 1 month from now, on May 27th, RE alumna Sarah Bernadette Matsushima will be releasing her first album, New Leaves, on all streaming services. Features all original works. Very exciting, Shari, and very exciting, Sarah. We hope you're watching and feel the love of your congregation. So we can't wait. I hope we'll share more details of where to be connected. So thank you, Shari. From Donna and Scott Best, a Joy of Gratitude from Scott and Donna Best. This Mother's Day marks our Jubilee anniversary for attending the fellowship, 25 years together. One of Donna's favorite services was Stearns sharing the UU principles as told by the Muppets. It's one of Stearns' favorites, too. And another favorite was every sermon Alison leads. Thank you very much for being integral parts of our family spiritual journey. You are both so appreciated. Donna and Scott were in the first service, so thank you to Donna and Scott. Very, very kind words. And we may reprise a little bit of the Muppets before the summer. We're talking about some ideas. Today we have a significant milestone of leadership that I want to honor in this space. The Strategic Planning Task Force met all throughout the pandemic and before, and when they stepped into that role, they had no idea a pandemic was to come. Organized us as a congregation for summits and planning groups, and recently we passed our strategic plan looking towards 5 years from now to 2027. And today, there is a transitional meeting between the Strategic Planning Task Force and now the group that will be implementing the strategic plan, the council, actually, that will be implementing the strategic plan. So I just want to acknowledge everyone on the team, but especially Nan Perigo, who chaired that task force and really worked so tirelessly on behalf of all of us and our future. So a milestone of gratitude for Nan, who was in the first service and is preparing for that meeting. And consider yourselves invited, because now that we're moving towards the implementation phase, whether or not you were able to participate in the planning phase, this is the shaping phase and the doing phase, and all are invited to become engaged in the works of between now and 2027. And we had one milestone come in via text as well from Susan Oxman. This is a milestone of sorrow, and it's about a family member of Elbjorg. Elbjorg's older sister, Signa, died Friday. Both her daughters, Vicky and Karin, were with their mother as she passed. Let us all hold Elbjorg and her sister and the entire family. May her sister's legacy, may the lessons of her life, and may the love that she gave away be brightly remembered by all. May it be so. And let us continue in a spirit of prayer and reflective meditation. Spirit of life, spirit of an abundant love. Flow in us and through us and among us and out from us. On this glorious May Day, a day of dancing and maypoles, of singing, of fires, and of connection to our Mother Earth. Surround us on this day where we focus on the well-being of laborers, on fair wages, on economic justice, on the rights of immigrants, on the rights of all to earn a living wage, to access adequate shelter and health care and education, and all the keys to a life of meaning and well-being. And we hold Wind of the Spirit, one of our partner organizations, who is organizing people today around immigrant rights on this day focused on laborers. May we be instruments of compassion and love, sowing seeds of life and connection to Mother Earth and tending to all her creatures and to clean water and access to resources, but not overconsumption. And may we also be tools of compassion and justice, ensuring that every human being knows their dignity and worth, with no exceptions. All these and so many more are our prayers, our yearnings, our meditations this May Day. Amen, and blessed be, and may it be so. Will you join in song? I invite you to rise in body or in spirit. Shall we gather at the river? The words are behind me and in the turquoise songbook, number 1046.
Shall we
1 minute of technical moments where things are out of order. Well, I'll say while I'm doing this that today's sermon is really inspired by two things. That we have our Getting to Know You class coming up next weekend, and I wanted to really invite us all to remember and celebrate some of our history, especially on this weekend, which is the anniversary of an important sermon delivered by William Ellery Channing, who is in many ways the spiritual founder of Unitarianism in this part of the country. There we go. That will be much happier, not in a reverse order. And I don't want you to lose this, because this is the real reason, which is a very significant thing is about to happen in our denomination, and our principles and purposes are about to be potentially completely revised. And so that is very significant. And so that is the other reason we are looking at movement and change within Unitarian Universalism. Did you know, and I know some of you do, and for some this will be a surprise, that Unitarian Universalism traces its roots in this country back to one of the most conservative Christians in this land? In fact, the most conservative Christian tradition, arguably, the land has ever known. Does anyone know the name of the tradition? There are two traditions, yes. The Puritans and the Pilgrims. You're exactly right. Now, when you think about the Pilgrims and the Puritans, the words open-minded we heard earlier and open-hearted, qualities that we lay claim to, do not come to mind. The Puritans were quite closed-minded, and today, what many people may remember from history is that they accused a number of women of being witches. Why? And men too, by the way, simply for being powerful, outspoken, and or for their knowledge of healing. And they executed them in dreadful ways, such as drowning and burning. In fact, I remember from my history class that a witch was proven to be a witch if a boulder was tied to her and she sank. Who, by that standard, would not be a witch? But it is, anyway, an amazing story, if you think about it, that one of the most radically inclusive religious sects that ever came out of Protestantism, Unitarian Universalism, traces its lineage to one of the most conservative. But our religious history is a story of movement and change, and I know that our future will include many religious shifts to come. When Lewis B. Fisher, the dean of St. Lawrence, which was founded as a Universalist seminary, was asked what Universalists and in general religious liberals stood for, he quipped, "The only true answer is that we do not stand at all. We move." Ours is a fluid faith based on the religious freedom of ordinary people, members, not just ministers, to discern what is required to be included in the covenant of the congregation. And here are a couple of kernels that we still hold in common with our religious forebears, the Puritans. One, the congregation is viewed as a voluntary association. People choose to be part of the covenant. Now, the Puritans used coercion and social pressure of severe magnitude at times, and we do not. But they started with that radical idea that membership is voluntary and shouldn't even be thrust upon children. 2, members create a covenant which contains the set of promises that members adhere to in order to be included fully in the life of the congregation, and that covenant can be changed over time by the members. 3, members can define and redefine what is required to join a particular community. The Puritans, as they moved towards Congregationalists, the standards shifted, and they even created something called the halfway covenant for people who could participate but had not could not fully do everything. And I think it was to maybe include their children who had different ideas about religion. 4, members have the power to select who is ordained as a minister and also to elect who serves as their minister by a democratic vote. This means that the membership can elect succeeding ministers who were more progressive in their theological bent, which did happen as Puritans moved towards more orthodox congregationalism to liberal congregationalism. Some of you may know that wing as United Church of Christ today, and then ultimately to Unitarians. Now, democratic votes in religious traditions can also lead to the opposite. People can vote themselves into a more conservative position, and the Southern Baptists are a good modern day example of that. When I started at Harvard Divinity School, there were a number of people who were there, women, because they were losing the ability to be leaders any longer in the Southern Baptist tradition, and so they were looking for a new religious home. So that was back in only 2000 to 2003, so they were continuing to shift to be more exclusionary. These ideas of a voluntary association held together by a covenant that can be changed for a community where the members define what is required to be a member and also have the power to elect their spiritual leaders led to who we are today. And these elements are all very much alive in our movement. And I'll add one more. The Puritans had something called the Cambridge Platform of 1648, which functioned as a guide for the larger association of independent congregations. Just as our congregation has its own mission and covenant, but we also adhere to the 7 principles, and now 8, and 6 sources of the wider Unitarian Universalist Association, although the wider UUA still only has 7 principles to date. The Cambridge Platform and our UUA Principles and Purposes document, which is found in Article 2 of our association bylaws, both affirm that our communities are autonomous, but that we have a role with one another, that we are supposed to support each other, learn from each other, and also hold one another accountable. The Cambridge Platform uses the word admonish, where for us it's more about mutual support. By the way, the Cambridge Platform, the Puritans also spelled out the ideal of separation of church and state, which is a steadfast goal that we hold to this day. It is also important to note that we are who we are today because of the merger of 2 liberal Protestant sects, the Universalists and the Unitarians, who merged together in 1961. The Universalists emerged from the Congregationalists, like the Unitarians did, but also from the Baptists and the unchurched. Universalism's story is one connected to persuasive itinerant preachers who traveled the country and convinced people of God's love and that a loving God would not punish people eternally in the afterlife for finite mistakes that they made in this one. And imagine just how attractive this was. Thousands of people would come to hear the Universalists, and I probably would too, because that was the time when there were Orthodox ministers preaching revivals with titles like, sermon titles like Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God by Jonathan Edwards. And so you could go to that tent, or you could go to the God is Love tent. And that tent was actually pretty crowded, but thousands gathered to hear the Universalist perspective. The example that we often share here in New Jersey especially is that of Reverend John Murray arriving in these shores and preaching a service where Murray Grove Retreat Center is located today, and essentially founding Universalism in this state. And those kinds of stories exist in the telling of the history of Universalism. By the way, The name Universalism comes from the accusers against the Universalists. It was about a heresy from an Orthodox Christian point of view. They were accused of the heresy of believing in universal salvation, or as we put it today, that our destinies are intertwined. We're all going to the same place. Some called them the Nohelites. Some called them the Universalists. The Unitarians instead grew steadily over time and with great deliberation, and from vote to vote, away from orthodoxy, which means right belief, orthodox, to the religious pluralism or the heterodoxy that we enjoy today. As we know, there is no longer a creedal test for membership as there once was. It is the covenant which remains the set of promises that we make about our moral aspirations and our promises for how to treat each other, our neighbors, the wider human family, and all beings. The Unitarians are also named by their accusers, and the early Unitarians ceased to be Congregationalists because we held a belief in the oneness of God, Unitarian, and did not uphold the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This very week is the anniversary of a sermon by the Reverend William Ellery Channing, the founding father of Unitarianism in this part of the world, where he reclaimed the accusatory label as his own and preached a message called Unitarian Christianity in 1819, on May 5th, 1819. At the ordination of the Reverend Jared Sparks in Baltimore. And the sermon that he preached was an hour and a half long. And that was pretty typical for Reverend Channing, who was quite the orator. One would have to be to preach an hour and a half. And the controversy exited that church in Baltimore, and it spread all across the mid-Atlantic and up throughout New England, and it was a turning point in our faith. And here are some significant moves that Channing made in that sermon. Number one, he asserted that reason was a foundation for religion, and that reason must be used when interpreting the Bible. He said, the Bible is a book written for men in the language of men, whose meaning is to be sought in the same manner as that of other books. And he also said, if reason be so dreadfully darkened by the fall that its most decisive judgments on religion are unworthy of trust, then Christianity and even natural theology must be abandoned. For the existence and veracity of God and the divine original of Christianity are conclusions of reason and must stand or fall with reason. 2, he rejected the Trinity, a big move. And what he did was he looked directly at the scriptures, and in the sermon talks about how in the earlier Gospels, the ones that are written earlier, really you see Jesus portrayed as a man, and it's not until much later that there's this concept of Jesus being of two substances, man and God. And so he asserts that Jesus is a man. He rejects predestination and original sin, very significant. And actually he talks about the human nature's potential to be like God or like Jesus, and that's actually the moral direction that we're headed in, that essentially we can move towards the greater good and continue to develop our moral conscience. And that's one of the reasons that original sin and the nature of Jesus as God disappears, because there's this understanding that we can commune directly with God like Jesus did, and that we can continue to grow towards love and the good. Channing took this concept of moral progress to heart, and he was engaged in many moral movements, and I'll just mention two. He was interested in ending debtors' prisons, which were everywhere when he was ministering, and he would often give a lot of his salary away to help release people from prison. And he moved to become a very strong voice in the abolition movement. So really jumping way ahead, once again, I want you to know that we are at a crossroads, a turning point from our faith. In 1648, there was the Cambridge Platform. And before the Principles of 1961, when asked about a statement that could indicate something about all Unitarian congregations, people would often offer this statement by James Freeman Clarke, who was part of the Transcendentalist crew along with Emerson. And he said this: Unitarians believe in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the leadership of Jesus, salvation by character, and the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. These were called the 5 points of the new theology. But, as you might imagine, by the middle of the 1900s, people had trouble. All of the Unitarian Universalists at that time, or proto-Unitarian Universalists, were not able to say all those things. They might not believe in the fatherhood of God. They might have issue with the brotherhood of man. Jesus was not the only leader. Salvation by character implies that some people at that time were going to hell. And then could we, in the wake of nuclear bombs, say that progress of mankind is onward and upward forever? I mean, there was a kind of naivete to that. So in 1961, the Unitarians and Universalists at merger created a new set of 6 principles that I'm going to read to you, which preceded the 1985 principles and purposes. And then to just point where we're going, our principles and purposes may be entirely rewritten by 2023. So for now, I want you to open either the teal hymnal or the gray one. In the gray one, if you open to the principles and purposes, they're right before the first hymn. And in the teal hymnal, I think they're something like page 6. So if you're online, you can go to www.uua.org and click on the beliefs section, and that will take you towards the 7 principles. You can actually enter the 7 principles right in the search function on the UUA's website. And you can do that later. You don't have to do that right now. So I want to invite folks in the room to just, here are the 7 principles and the 6 sources, and I'm going to read the 1961 principles. And then I'm going to ask you what changed. And we're foreshadowing what might change in the future. So, in 1961, the Unitarians and the Universalists said this about where we stand or where we're moving. In accordance with these corporate purposes, the members of the UUA, dedicated to the principles of a free faith, unite in seeking, 1, to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. 2, to cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. 3, to affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. 4, to implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. 5, to serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion. And 6, to encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. So you just heard me read the 1961 principles, and you're looking at the ones that were passed in 1985. What's something that changed? Anyone? What's something that changed? Do you notice a difference? Man. That's right. Man. We now use gender-inclusive language. And one of the most recent shifts, if you look in the sources, this was just a couple of years ago at GA, it was voted to change words and deeds of prophetic women and men to people, prophetic people. That's the most recent change. So that's gender-inclusive language. Any other change? Shari.
The first principle now is inherent worth and dignity as opposed to the free and responsible search concept.
Right. The order has changed. The inherent worth and dignity. And the other point I would even mention, and someone said this at the last service, is that there's a different concept about from supreme worth of every human being, which feels a little like progress onward and upward forever, to maybe a stance of humility as well as optimism about human nature. And it's about the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. I appreciate that, the switch and the content. Hey, folks, Green Earth Ministry folks, is there anything else that you noticed that changed? The seventh principle, there's no concept of this, right? We added the seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And if you look at the sources, it really opens from Judaism and Christianity to world religions, humanism. It's really much more diverse in terms of what we include there. And people are now asking, well, what about Islam? Or what about naming some of the world religions? Or, there's a move afoot to continue to create change. So last summer, we adopted the new eighth principle here at our June meeting as a part of a growing grassroots movement to acknowledge the legacy of racism and the need to dismantle it, and the shift over the last decades from individualism to community, to the beloved community. And here is that principle. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. And I'll just name, people have been looking at that first principle and said, no, although we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, there's not enough evidence. We need to move towards greater evidence that we are committed to Black lives, to undocumented immigrants, to trans lives. And the eighth principle is a movement in that direction to name that. And the other piece is that tension between individual freedom and the collective well-being. So, that's a short version, but those are some of the things people have been asking to focus on. But in our effort to focus on the eighth principle, I don't want you to miss what is happening. There is an Article 2 commission that has been meeting for a couple of years that will likely be proposing entirely new language for all of our principles and purposes. It's not just about an eighth principle. It's about a new expression of where we're moving today. And I wish it wasn't named the Article 2 Commission focused on the bylaws, because I feel like nobody hears anything after that. And so it should have a name like the Principles and Purposes Might Completely Change Committee. And the first draft is going to be given to the UUA Board of Trustees in January 2023. This is very soon. So we'll be talking about this at GA in June. Everyone's invited to attend in person or virtually. And obviously next June, there may even be a first kind of vote. And we have an opportunity to engage and give input. So these are some of the things that have been raised. We talked about the eighth principle reasons, and I'll mention another. Some have said, what about all beings? Is there enough evidence in the face of growing extinctions that we truly promote all beings? And then Betsy Burr has had an idea that other people have also been talking about. What about the order, like you brought up, Shari, the shift in the order? Should the seventh principle be first? Should we start with the interdependent web and move to the individual? Should we start with the eighth principle? So there's a real shift potentially afoot. And I won't read the whole charge to the Article 2 Commission because it's too long, but I will read the first paragraph and you can look for it online. The Article 2 Study Commission is hereby charged to review Article 2 of the UUA bylaws and propose any revisions that will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be a relevant and powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. Proposed changes should articulate core UU theological values. The board believes that one core theological value shared widely among UUs is love. The Commission on Appraisal, in its report Engaging Our Theological Diversity, cites Robert Miller's study of Unitarian Universalism, stating, quote, UUs ranked loving as an instrumental value and mature love as a terminal value more highly than did respondents from other groups, religious and non-religious combined. Dr. Cornell West says that justice is what love looks like in public. Our commitment to personal, institutional, and cultural change rooted in anti-oppression, anti-racism, and multiculturalism values and practices is love in action and should be centered in any revision of Article 2. And it goes on, including to say that it should be poetic and concise, and that there might be a simple form that's poetic and concise that points towards more language elsewhere. So remember, our principles and purposes, our covenant is not about where we stand. It is about where we are moving to. It matters that we added the seventh principle and the commitment to the interdependent web of all existence in 1985. Who would we be today if we hadn't have made that shift and commitment? So what then are the set of moral promises that will allow us to thrive into the future and to become a Unitarian Universalism that is religiously diverse, multicultural, multiracial, multigenerational, and a movement for the expression of life and love and liberation? Yes, let us keep on moving forward together, and may it be in the direction of love. Will you rise in body and or spirit and join in our closing song, Siahamba Kukanyenkwenkos. We are marching in the light of God. Caminando en la luz de Dios, just helping with pronunciation.
It goes fast.
See
was fun. And now, in our going, may the light of love bless us and keep us. May it shine down upon us. May it radiate out from within us. May it be gracious unto us. And may it grant that all of us are peace builders and liberation devotees. For this is the day, friends, that we are given. So let us sow seeds of justice and gladness in it. Blessed be, and let us keep on moving forward together.